The Tactical Operations Center at Cop Redwood buzzed with subdued chatter, the kind filtered through layers of rank, fatigue, and recycled air. The screens flickered with overlapping maps, satellite loops, and blocky status updates, most of them tagged red, yellow, or irrelevant. In the rear third of the room, Staff Sergeant Elena Carter stood still, one boot slightly offset for balance, her notepad folded twice and tucked behind her wrist. No one addressed her directly. Her name hadn't been called during the assignment review. It didn't need to be. A junior analyst nudged his coffee thermos toward another console. His voice dropped low, barely above the hum of the projector fan. Just throw the quiet one on the shelf sector. His partner didn't respond with words, just thumbed the display toward a gray arc labeled Foxtrot 6. Low priority. Flood prone. No line-of-sight coverage upstream. Elena heard the term passive asset slip through someone's mouth like a paper cut. One officer smirked without turning. She's a warm body. She won't get bored. Just wet. No one looked her way. Not even when her name blinked. Briefly, in blue at the corner of the terrain overlay. It stayed visible for less than a second before getting minimized beneath the next set of fire corridor routes. The mission lead, seated beside the battalion. SIGINT rep didn't question it. The assignment required no resources, no drone flight, no air recon, just observation. File it, he said, without emotion. Market eyes only. Elena nodded once to herself and stepped back from the wall. She didn't carry her kit into the TOC. She never did. That stayed at the ready room 2 buildings down, where gear wasn't cleaned by order but by trust. The quartermaster there didn't say anything when she handed over her clearance sheet. He just slid a fresh ammo can across the counter and tapped twice for acknowledgement. She reviewed the contents before accepting M110A1 SDMR, freshly inspected, suppressor issued, 1 cleaning kit, 1 sealed box of federal gold medal 7.62 NATO match rounds. All matched her last known preferences. Her secondary was an M18 Sig Sauer with 2 loaded magazines, both verified and stored in a horizontal belt pouch beside the PRC-150A. She declined the throat mic and selected a low-profile headset instead. The comm wire coiled neatly through her harness. Antenna bent to minimize snagging. She didn't ask for a spotter scope. She didn't request an IR tab or marker. When handed a ghillie roll, she examined the threading, looped a section of camouflage net through the chest band herself, and returned it to her ruck without a word. She stepped into the prep bay at 06:15. The light was flat and sterile, overhead strips bouncing off clean metal benches and taped crates. Her ruck was already pre-configured. She'd done it the night before, just in case. The waterproof insert held 3 laminated maps, wind charts in 2 formats, elevation markers, and handwritten overlays based on the last weather shift. She tightened the straps manually, then ran her finger once across the sight line on her scope before folding the cover back into place. Outside, gravel crunched under her boots. She moved past the motor pool and across the tarmac without slowing. One mechanic near the intake tent saw her pass and leaned toward another tech. Clipboard again. He mumbled. No one responded. Elena didn't glance their way. The rain had already started to fall in a thin, persistent drizzle. It slid across the concrete like silk. The sky wasn't dark yet, but it wasn't clear either. A storm front from the south was pressing inland. She had seen the updated banding on the satellite screen, though no one had mentioned it in the brief. Her gloves were dry for now, packed in the outer pouch of her vest. The ghillie suit was looped at the waist and slung low to avoid snagging during ascent. She reached the extraction line staging area by 06:37. The last outbound team had cleared 20 minutes earlier. There was no vehicle manifest for her. Her path to Foxtrot 6 was designated on foot. No support, no backup, just ingress, position, and hold. She followed the drainage cut behind the comm shelter, where the terrain dipped just enough to keep her out of direct line from the watchtowers. The walk would take just under an hour at controlled pace, 90 minutes with caution. She knew every turn. She'd been studying the slope and tributary fork for weeks. No one had assigned it to her at the time. She just had a feeling it was going to matter eventually. By the time she cleared the tree break at the edge of the marsh basin, the radio was silent. She toggled it once to confirm. Static. No beacon. No inbound feed. That was expected. Drones wouldn't fly in this saturation. High interference along the eastward band meant all aerial overwatch was down until weather cleared. It made her presence even more redundant on paper. On the ground, it made her irreplaceable. She stopped beneath a cluster of low brush near the bank and ran her eyes across the waterline. Nothing moved. No wind, no frogs, just the sound of rain hitting water. Gentle, repetitive, and absolute. She knelt once, adjusted her knee rest, and began unrolling her blind. The frame clicked together in practiced sequence, her gloves moving like they remembered the drill better than she did. No one called her name. No one tracked her step count. But Elena Carter was on mission, and she knew, even before setting the optic, that she was exactly where she needed to be. The rain didn't fall in bursts. It came steady, thin and unrelenting, the kind that sank deep into fabric and skin without making a sound loud enough to notice. Elena Carter reached the edge of the tributary basin at 07:48. Water pooled around her boots, rising past the ankle cuffs and soaking into the crease at her knees. She didn't adjust for comfort. The discomfort was part of the position. The blind was already half-formed from the prior recon. She had tested the stability of the rock patch during a weather lull 2 weeks before. Now, with mud climbing her shins and the wind low but unpredictable, she moved slowly under the collapsed root overhang and slid into the depression behind the brush. Her ghillie netting, pre-woven with clay-colored fibers, unrolled easily and settled around her body with practiced folds. One corner was already weighted with a smoothed river stone. She let it land just where she'd marked with her glove tip. The M110A1 came out dry. She had sealed it in a double layer of waterproof wrap, and not a drop had slipped through. The bipod legs locked into position with 2 short clicks. She pressed the base into the earth and adjusted the left leg by feel, compensating for slope with a folded strip of ration foil beneath the foot. Her cheek weld alignment was checked second, then the optic. She didn't uncover the scope yet. The light was too diffuse, too soft. It would fog immediately. At 08:03 she reached for the wind chart. It slid from the inner plate pocket of her vest like a page from memory. The laminate was curled at the edges, not from moisture but from use. Her handwriting dotted the margin in black marker slight, angled notes about drag layers, deflection zones, and thermal shift expectations. She anchored the chart with a flake of slate near her right boot. The color of the stone nearly matched the ink. Movement remained minimal. The reeds at the far side didn't bend. No frogs called. She took that as signal enough. Pulling a dense ration bar from her side pouch, she bit the corner and let it rest between her cheek and molars. It tasted like chalk and salt. She didn't chew. She waited for it to soften. Her jaw moved only once to reposition the bite. At 08:14, she pressed the PRC 152A's side button once. The channel tone confirmed it was live. Bravo. 6 eyes on. No response came back. She didn't expect one. Comms were compromised across the eastern band due to storm activity. Drones had already been grounded. Momo. She was alone in sector. But that wasn't new. She didn't need permission to observe. The scope remained capped. Her eyes tracked the surface of the water instead. Reflections wavered with wind she couldn't feel yet, indicating crossflow higher up. The tributary was quieter than she remembered. The silence didn't bother her. She measured time by breath, not by noise. At 08:36, a single drop from the canopy above landed on her left sleeve. She didn't move. The water spread, soaked in, and disappeared. She had adjusted her rifle strap twice since settling. Each movement had purpose. None of it rushed. She did not glance at her watch. She already knew how long she'd been prone. By 08:47, the optic cleared from condensation. She wiped it with the same cloth edge she always used. One corner had been stitched tighter for friction. Her fingers found it by memory. She didn't adjust the brightness setting. That would come later. Nothing in front of her changed. No shadows shifted, but her breath stayed slow. Her posture never collapsed into rest. She held the line because that was the job. Hold, observe, report, if needed. The rest wasn't her concern. The system didn't track her input in real time. That gave her freedom to do the part no one else wanted. She didn't flinch when another drop hit her cheek at 09:03. She simply blinked once and let it pass. Her finger rested near the trigger guard. Her support hand cradled the stock as if weightless. Stillness wasn't something she endured. It was something she chose. The mission was alive, even if it looked forgotten on the map. And Elena Carter was holding the line. The operations center was quiet in that late cycle way. When the shift had turned over but the coffee hadn't kicked in, screens glowed with updated feed markers. Most showed standby alerts or static overlays of impassable sectors. One screen pulsed faint blue at the far right corner, a zone no one had touched since yesterday's extraction revision. The label read, Foxtrot 6. A junior officer leaned over, squinted at the blinking tag, then turned toward the operations coordinator. Is this beacon still live? The coordinator tapped his tablet and scrolled through the asset manifest. Elena Carter's call sign had been marked inactive at 24:00 the night prior. She wasn't on the current op cycle. The system had cleared her status, logged the sector as cold, and redirected drone support upstream. He narrowed his eyes. But the GPS feed still showed stable data. Strong signal. Still transmitting. Across the room, someone muttered that her post had been designated passive. No active tasking remained. Just a courtesy hold. The weather front had grounded all UAVs in the East Corridor. No new ISR data. No real-time visual on the tributary zone. The junior officer leaned in again. Pull her. If she's still out there, she's overstayed her slot. The tech staff confirmed the comlink was unresponsive. No pings, no acknowledgements. She had likely shut it down manually. That wasn't a malfunction. That was a decision. A silence by design. The operations coordinator frowned, shifted in his seat, and clicked into the log archive. Her last message had been hours ago. Foxtrot 6. Eyes on. Nothing since. Back in the field, Elena Carter didn't check the watch strapped to her wrist. She already knew the mission window had closed. The PRC-152A beside her boot had been powered down before sunrise. The rain was heavier now. It tapped gently against her rifle wrap and ran in rivulets across the laminated chart beside her knee. Her pulse was even. Her body still. No one was watching her. No one had told her to remain. But the tributary hadn't cleared. The slope beyond the far bank still held shadow. She hadn't moved because the ground hadn't spoken otherwise. Her orders were to hold until no longer required. She hadn't received confirmation either way. In the command tent, a logistics officer scrolled past her last ping and said flatly, "It's not on us." She wasn't scheduled to stay past midnight. The ops chief didn't respond. He stared at the flashing Foxtrot 6 beacon for a moment, then stood and walked to the comms wall. He didn't say her name, but he knew. Out in the blind, Elena adjusted her left boot half an inch to relieve pressure on her calf. Her breath was calm. The blind was silent. She was still on mission, even if the system had moved on. 30 hours had passed since Elena Carter stepped off the main line and disappeared into the low terrain at Foxtrot 6. She hadn't spoken in nearly a full day. Her body was soaked through despite the oil sheet wrap, her gloves clinging to her hands with the weight of rain and time. The cold wasn't sharp anymore. It was dull, persistent, the kind that seeped through seams and settled into the tendons, but she wasn't shaking. Her breathing held steady. Her focus hadn't drifted. The tributary ahead of her stretched flat, its surface smooth as glass. Mist rolled low above it, not in waves but in slow bands, dragging across the water like breath on mirror. She watched the way the reflection split near the northern bend. A slight ripple, not from a drop, not from fish. Compression, subtle, directional. Her eyes narrowed. The slope behind that patch was green-coated on her wind chart. Crosswind average was 1.2 knots, slight left to right, denser near the surface. She didn't reach for the chart. She didn't need to. It was already written behind her eyes. She adjusted the angle of her cheek weld, nudging the rifle stock just a fraction against her shoulder. The optic had cleared 5 minutes ago after she wiped the lens with the edge of her collar. No fog now. Just that blue-gray tint that always came right before the light broke wrong. Visibility hovered around 50 meters. Far side. Maybe 60. That was enough. The leaves on the far bank hung heavy. No wind yet. But the grass directly in front of her shifted slightly. Just one corner lifting before settling again. That told her the drag layer was real. Air was moving low, tight across the surface. It would slow the bullet slightly. Not enough to throw impact by more than a quarter inch. She had already dialed the elevation knob once. 3 clicks at 410 meters. It held. Then, the first shape appeared. Not from the trail, but directly through the undergrowth. A figure moved, angled forward, crouched low to shrink profile. His jacket was layered, hood down, zip half sealed at the collar. He moved carefully, not tentative, just controlled. In his left hand, a satellite phone. Not in use, not raised, but powered, visible, and live. She did not shift. Her scope stayed aligned. Her trigger finger hovered near the guard but didn't close. She let the image stabilize. One breath. Then another. 2 more figures appeared behind him, trailing at offset spacing. They didn't cover him. They weren't flankers. They were observers. Tail elements. Loose. Untrained. She didn't care about them. Her rifle held the lead in center scope. She watched him pause near the bank, check his footing, then scan left. He crouched for just a moment. That's when she noted the slight twitch in his shoulder, a weight shift beneath the gear that suggested something worn too long, too tight. His phone clipped to vest now. His right hand stayed open. Elena blinked once. Her breath slowed further. She adjusted windage by feel. Just 1 click left. Then another half back, enough to compensate for the shallow air churn at the surface. Her support hand curled around the underside of the rail. She didn't need the rangefinder. She didn't even look down. That slope had been burned into her mind the night she laminated the overlay. Another gust moved the mist at a diagonal, not strong, just enough to send a single leaf skimming across the tributary surface. She marked the distance where it touched, then drifted. Right on pattern. She knew exactly what that meant. Inside the blind, her body didn't move. Her knees burned from the pressure. Her back ached from angle strain. But none of that mattered. The shot hadn't come yet. But it was there, forming in the stillness, building beneath the fog. She waited. The world outside barely breathed. So neither did she. The moment didn't come with a signal. No rush. No adrenaline spike. Just a stillness that aligned with everything Elena had been waiting for. The target was exposed now, crouched beside the slope with his back angled slightly toward the open water. His satellite phone was clipped to the front strap of his vest, his left knee bent under weight. The other hovered, just off balance. That was the break in pattern. That was the tell. Elena's finger found the trigger by memory, not hesitation. Her breathing stayed even. She didn't hold her breath. She exhaled slowly through her nose and let her lungs settle. The stock rested firm against her shoulder. No tension in her hands. No movement in her cheek. Her scope tracked the wind drag, now steady at surface level. Left to right. Slight chop from the mist brushing over the bank. She didn't blink. Her support hand cradled the foreign just enough to absorb the movement. Her elbow was set. Her spine aligned. There were no second chances. There never had been. She wasn't thinking about consequence. She was thinking about placement. Upper chest, just below the collar line. Soft armor wouldn't stop it. Her breath bottomed out. She pressed. The suppressed crack of the M110A1 barely lifted above the sound of the rain. The recoil was gentle, absorbed through muscle and practice. The casing ejected clean, caught mid-fall by her gloved hand. The round crossed the tributary in under a second. There was no arc. Just impact. The figure dropped behind the slope like weight finally took him. The others scattered without pattern, ducking into the tree line. She didn't track them. They weren't the reason she'd waited through 32 hours of cold and silence. Her scope held steady on the empty space where the target had been. She didn't smile, didn't blink. She reached for the radio, powered it on with a tap of her thumb, and waited one beat for the channel to clear. Her voice came calm, without volume. Foxtrot 6, target down, location marked, sweep requested. Then she let go. She placed the spent casing beside the laminated wind chart without looking. The chart was damp around the edges, but still legible. Her fingers adjusted the scope cap back into place, then checked the bolt by feel. One movement, smooth and controlled. There was no follow-up, no voice in her ear. She didn't expect one. The tributary stayed quiet. The waterline flat again. Nothing moved across the far bank. The moment was over before anyone else even knew it had begun. She did not shift position. She did not record the time. She simply returned to stillness. This wasn't about courage. It never had been. It was about seeing the moment clearly and doing the work. One shot. Nothing wasted. Nothing delayed. The mission wasn't over yet. But the reason she came had just ended with precision. She stayed with the silence until it settled again. Then she waited. Not for orders. Just for the field to breathe. The ranger team hit the slope at 1422 boots, dragging through thick silt as they followed the GPS marker buried in the last clean signal. The rain hadn't stopped, but it had softened into mist. The kind that stuck to skin without sound. Their squad lead, a corporal out of Echo, signaled with one hand toward the embankment. They moved in low, rifles down but ready. No contact, no fire, just still water and soaked brush. The body lay face down near the tree line, one arm twisted behind him. No blood trail, just a clean fall, as if gravity had taken over the second the shot hit. He was still breathing, though shallow, uneven. The satellite phone had dropped beside his vest. Screen cracked, but glowing faintly. No weapon on him. No resistance logged. They rolled him carefully and found the ID folded under the inner waistband, along with an encrypted key card tagged to a known target profile. Facial scan confirmed it. The corporal called it in, short and clipped. High-value objective recovered. Injured, but alive. Confirmed non-lethal impact. Site secure. The transmission bounced back to the Tactical Operations Center in less than a minute. Inside, the atmosphere didn't shift right away. Screens blinked. Boards updated. The map feed pulsed once in acknowledgement. Then silence. A tech scrolled back through the active file and frowned. He flagged the last call sign logged for Foxtrot 6. The timestamp was wrong. She hadn't been listed on the current cycle. Her name had cleared off at hour 12. No one had relogged her. She was off the board. He double-checked the ping from her coordinates. It was clean. Too clean. Exact to 3 decimal points. No lag, no dropout. A perfect tag on the final shot. Another analyst leaned over his shoulder, narrowed her eyes, and pulled the backup comm log. Same thing. The last voice message had been hours ago. Target down. Sweep requested. That was it. No hesitation. No overlay. Just the fact of it. The senior logistics officer stood by the center screen, arms folded across his chest. He didn't say anything at first. The feed was still looping the fogged-over drone shot from earlier in the day. No live visual had been available. The sector had been marked cold by command decision, reclassified as low priority, minimal oversight, minimal risk. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked to the mission controller. She wasn't cleared to stay. Was she? The controller shook his head. Her window closed 12 hours ago. No one extended it. She stayed anyway. Another silence passed. Then someone from the admin side stepped to the manual logbook. They flipped to the assignment ledger. There was a blank next to Foxtrot 6. A line where her name should have been. Someone had scratched a pencil notation in the margin during the last hour. Carter. E. SSG. Passive hold. The operations commander stepped forward. He'd been watching the board, not speaking. He tapped the timestamp from the incoming shot call. Then he looked at the mission clock, now rolling past 32:07. His voice was quiet. She saw it coming. We didn't. No one disagreed. The screen showed the tributary line again, the slope where the target had fallen. Still quiet. Still gray. One of the junior officers started to say something about oversight procedures, but the commander raised a hand and cut him off. Not now. The decision was done. The shot had ended the search. The only operative who stayed in place was the one no one tracked. She hadn't been cleared. She hadn't been asked. But she had remained when it counted. In the back of the room, a comms specialist updated the official record. Elena Carter's call sign was restored. Foxtrot 6. Status complete. Effectiveness 100.0%. The system flagged the entry for irregular command structure. The override was approved with a single click. No ceremony followed. No announcement. Just quiet acknowledgement. The type that only happens when a machine realizes it missed the most important variable. Elena Carter had seen what no sensor caught. She had waded through silence and cold and disregard, and she had known, without confirmation, that the tributary wasn't clear, that it was never just a dead sector. It was the way out, and she had blocked it alone. The sky above the outpost was the same gray it had been for 2 days. Low ceiling. No shadow. The kind of light that made everything flat, as if color had been drained from the landscape. Elena Carter walked in from the east access road, boots pulling through the last stretch of mud with each step. The rain still came, steady now, not sharp. It clung to her like a second uniform. Her uniform was soaked, sleeves dragging, patches caked in riverbank silt. The ghillie net hung over her shoulders in clumps, too wet to fold, too heavy to carry. She didn't take it off. She walked straight past the perimeter checkpoint, nodding once at the guard, who didn't return it. Not because of disrespect, just surprise. No one expected anyone on foot from Foxtrot 6. Inside the armory, the lights buzzed faintly. The room was warm, dry, and smelled like solvent and steel. She paused at the outer table, unslung the M110A1 and placed it carefully into the padded tray. She wiped the water from the optic with the edge of her cloth, folded it tight, and set it down beside the sealed casing. One spent round, logged and tagged. Her name wasn't on the roster, but the tech knew better than to ask. He glanced at her hands, mud under her nails, small tears in the glove seams. She didn't say anything, just pressed her thumb to the asset return screen, waited for the green check, and turned away. No salute, no handshake, just process. Outside, the sound of rotors thumped in the distance. An evac was cycling out, probably the sweep team returning. Elena didn't look. She headed toward the barracks, gear strap trailing behind her in the mud. Her pace didn't change. She moved like someone who hadn't stopped in days and wasn't ready to yet. By the mess hall, a group of rangers leaned against the wall, smoking. One of them looked up. His uniform still smelled of medkits and field iodine. He tilted his head, squinting at her through the mist. Then his eyes widened slightly. "You were the one at Foxtrot." She paused, adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "Why'd you stay?" Her answer came quiet, almost beneath the rain. Didn't want to miss it. He didn't say anything else. She didn't explain. She just kept walking. The door to the barracks was half open. Her bunk was third from the left. She sat slowly, peeled off the soaked top layer, and placed it in the bin beside her footlocker. Her hands moved with the kind of muscle memory that didn't require thought. The same way she cleaned a rifle, the same way she folded a field map in wind. No one came to debrief her. No officer called her in. There were no commendations on the board, no printed reports. Just a note in the ops log, time-stamped, with her name written in pencil beside Foxtrot 6. Elena lay back on the cot. The fabric creaked under her weight. Her eyes stayed open, her breath slow. She wasn't waiting for anything. The job was done. That was enough. Outside, the wind shifted. It carried the rain sideways now, tapping against the metal siding in irregular rhythms. Inside, the room was still. No movement, no applause. Just silence, full of something that didn't need to be named. And for Elena Carter, that was all it had ever been. Not the orders, not the recognition, just the moment, and the choice to stay. The debrief ran quiet, not tense, just slow. A stillness in the tent that felt deliberate. No one raised their voice. No one filled silence with unnecessary talk. The operation had ended hours ago, but the weight of it settled in later, once the adrenaline wore off and the data started lining up. Screens glowed with the replay. Not from the drone feed, it had gone dark during the storm, but from the GPS marker and synced logs. One analyst played the final transmission again. Foxtrot 6. Target down. Location marked. The voice was calm, unshaken. No request for extraction. Just confirmation and silence. Across the table, the senior logistics officer sat with a pen between his fingers, tapping it once against a notepad that didn't have Elena Carter's name on it. Not originally. He hadn't said much since the moment her beacon lit back up. His earlier dismissal of her role was still fresh in the room. He didn't take it back, but he didn't defend it either. Another junior analyst pulled the mission ledger and turned to the extraction log. The line for Foxtrot 6 was blank. Someone had penciled in a soft note during the sweep. Passive hold confirmed, but no full signature. Now, under the guidance of the ops lead, the analyst typed her name in, time-stamped it properly, and flagged the record for command review. There was a pause. Then someone asked whether they should adjust the post-op designation. Technically, Elena had acted outside clearance. Her comms were off. She stayed without authorization. The operations lead didn't hesitate. We don't edit results. The decision was final. Her call sign stayed logged. Her action marked the pivot of the mission. That settled it. No one said she was right. No one called her a hero. The system didn't offer parades. It offered correction. Quietly, but completely. Foxtrot 6 had been tagged cold. She had made it matter. Not through a dramatic push or chain of command dispute, just through presence, through stillness, through choice. Outside, the rain had started again, the kind that reminded them how close the line between visibility and blindness could be. One officer leaned over the terminal and watched the timestamp flicker back to life, her marker now linked to the successful takedown. Confirmed HVT. Clean shot. No civilian presence. Minimal asset use. Maximum result. They didn't update her commendation file. Not yet. They didn't call her in. They just adjusted the map. Set a new protocol. From now on, the ops lead said, "We flag silence as not always absence." A system doesn't apologize. It recalibrates, one line at a time, And that night, Elena Carter's name moved from the margin into the center column. Elena Carter never raised her hand for recognition. She didn't stay in that blind because someone asked her to. She stayed because the job wasn't finished, and she didn't trust silence to mean safety. There was no flag waving, no grand gesture, just a decision made in the quiet space between protocol and instinct. What she did wasn't heroic in the way people usually define it. She didn't defy orders. She didn't challenge the chain of command. She simply refused to leave a gap open when no one else was watching. That was all. And that was everything. She knew the signs. She knew the land. And when the feed went down, when the weather grounded the drones, and the roster said her presence no longer mattered, she stayed. Not for credit. Not out of pride. Because something told her the crossing wasn't clear. No one remembered assigning her to stop a manhunt. No one expected the most pivotal move to come from a quiet name scratched on the corner of a logistics ledger. But it did. The outcome changed because she didn't move when everyone else did. Her return wasn't marked with applause. She didn't speak during the review. She didn't remind anyone of what they overlooked. She just walked back, turned in her gear, and folded herself into the silence again. What remains isn't a story about glory. It's about presence. About one person who listened to her training, to her environment, and to something deeper that couldn't be written into a mission plan. Elena Carter made no demands, but she made a choice, one that said, I see this through, even if no one's watching, even if they already think I've left. And maybe that's what we should remember. Sometimes, the strongest move is not leaving.